Serena. What should I say? Like,
Daniel, what do you want to know about Serena?
How old she is?
He wants to know how old you are.
I'm in sixth grade. I mean, I'm going to sixth grade.
Wow. Okay. You are young to be taking a push, but you look confident. I can see it in your eyes. Okay. Serena, what's your favorite part of American history?
I mean, I really like a year ago, I learned about the American Revolutionary War and I found it really interesting.
Okay, the American Revolution, the beginning of the country. We'll learn that and some of the middle stuff too. So a lot of cool stuff to come. What about you, Jason? Tell us about yourself. So far, it's how old are you and what's your favorite part of American history? I can't hear you.
I'm 15.
15? Oh, wait. And what's your favorite part of American history?
World War II.
World War II. What do you find interesting about World War II?
Like how America played its part.
Yeah, the role of issue. I'm very interested about that by your answers, because both of you have picked like two of maybe like I'd say like five of the most transformative moments in the history of this continent, and some of the most transformative moments in just history in the last 500 or 600 years. Both you and Serena, and we'll definitely do a lot with those specific moments. World War II is an important thing. Revolutionary War is an important thing. But for me, what's way more important than the war or like, this specific battle, this general, whatever, what's more important to me is why did we get there? Why did we win that? Like, what made the United States in the position to do what it did in World War II? What made the United States in the position to do what it wanted? Like, why did it even want to go against Britain in the Revolutionary War? What I hope you'll all end up getting away from this class, if nothing else, okay, I'm going to say this a lot, but what I hope you will get away from the class is that there is a lot of events in history, but no one really cares if you know what event happened. Like, it doesn't really matter if you memorize a year or a date or a name or an event. What's really important is to know why events happen and what they cause in turn. Know the connections rather than just the specific instances. Sorry, I did not mean to start lecturing yet. Okay, so I've just been informed that Daniel, everyone turn your cameras on. Dorcas, Daniel, Sebastian, people. Daniel, I've been informed that Serena is your sister. So I'm gonna ask Serena, what's the most embarrassing thing your brother has done in the past year?
I don't know what to say.
Okay, you have a loyal sister, Daniel. Let's see if he'll turn on you. Daniel, tell us something stupid your sister has done.
I don't know.
I'm impressed by your loyalty. I'm very impressed. I would have turned on my sister immediately. I would not have even blinked an eye. Okay, but anyway. Okay, so Daniel, tell us, I guess, how old you are and what your favorite part of American history is.
I'm going into ninth grade and I like World War I.
World War One. What is?
I mean two. Sorry.
Oh, World War II. What's
misspoke.
interesting to you about World War II?
Well, it's American history, so like America's involvement in it.
Okay, so America's involvement, like, is it like the idea that it's like a recent conflict? Like, why did you choose that versus like, an old war from way back when?
Well, because it's fairly recent.
Yeah, it's kind of the last big war, big thing America's involved in terms of like giant scale stuff. Okay, who have we not talked to? Oh yeah, I guess I let you ask a question to Serena. So Serena, do you have a question for Daniel?
I don't know if you already know this, but what's your favorite sport?
Hockey.
I did know that, and I also figured it by the clearly not Daniel, who I'm looking at on the screen. He appears to be a player for the Edmonton Oilers, which I now know is a team. So, hockey. Anyone else here hockey fans? I just know it works kind of like soccer. Jason, do you like soccer?
I don't really follow any sports.
Okay. Do you follow any electronic sports?
No.
Okay, so he does not follow electronics, but why is that offensive? Are you British?
I'm not British. I'm just not American.
Where are you from?
I'm in Hong Kong.
Okay, so do you say football?
Of course.
Well, okay. You see, it's soccer. Because I said so. I'm joking.
You see, you can. Okay,
what?
whatever.
What's your response? Go ahead.
You don't play other forms of football here.
Yes, and clearly a game where you take a giant ball and you throw it with your hand, that should be called football, not the one with your
It's
feet.
it's
I'm-
not even a ball. It's like a rugby ball. It's like American rugby or something.
I'm just saying we're right. But anyway, so let's get into some of the more meated stuff. Well, Sebastian, quickly tell us how old you are and what you think the most interesting part of American history is.
I'm 13. I think the most interesting part of American history is how the US became a superpower from like the 20th century in like the 20th century.
Okay, very, very well, elegant answer, I must say. If I'm going to be honest, that's also the broadly speaking the most interesting part of American history to me. Is since I'm like so far in like college, I've been studying economics and stuff like that. So the economic rise of America, which especially was the end of the 1800s, early 1900s. Another thing I hope you get out of learning about history is just how important economics is. We throw around that word all the time. Like, you probably hear all the grown-ups, they'll all be like, oh, blah, 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 inflation, blah, 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 or economics is bad, economics is good. We just say those words very often, but they mean something very deep. They mean all the stuff that we do. Like when you guys have a job or your parents already have jobs and all those things, much of our lives, when we buy things, we sell things, we work, we have fun, all that is economics. So in many ways, the composition of our lives, like what we do, our work, our play, our food, our housing, they all fall under this umbrella of economics. And as you might guess, probably the biggest driving factor in real change throughout history and in the future going forward comes from changes in what we do, changes in what we buy, where we live, the technology we use. That's economics. So another thing I hope to you get out of this whole course as we go much more deep than just that is the idea that, it's not just government stuff. It's not just some king, King George saying something. It's not just George Washington saying something. It's easy to remember the name George Washington, but there's a lot of other things that matter that aren't just kings and generals and presidents and senators and whatever. They're just everyday people doing something a little bit differently, like deciding, hey, I could go move to that city and get a job at a factory instead of working here on that farm. One person decides to do that, hey, not a big deal. 10 million people decide to do that, changes the fabric of the country. It's a part of the Industrial Revolution. So think of not just great people when you think of history. Don't just think of the George Washingtons. They're important, they're really important. But think also about everyday people like you and me. And I mean, I don't know if maybe one of your parents is the president or something like that, but probably your parents and my parents and our families. Like most people are not like, George Washington, but most people, like the large everyday people, are also the real driving force behind change. Okay, sorry to keep interrupting you guys. Dorcas, are you there?
Yes,
How do I pronounce your name? I feel like I'm butchering it.
Dorcas.
Okay, I wasn't. Good job. So Dorcas, tell us what your favorite part of American history is.
Actually, I also like the American Revolution.
American Revolution? Okay. And what's your favorite sport? Dorcas?
Badminton.
Badminton. I like to think I'm good at badminton. I'm not, but it's fun. It's very fun. Is anyone here a basketball fan? I think that's got to be my favorite sport right now. Nah, it's okay. You guys are too short. Maybe in a little bit you'll grow. I mean, I can't talk. I'm short and I'm not going to grow anymore. Okay, so who else we have? People, turn on your cameras. Sebastian, Daniel, do it. Eddie. Tina, we haven't heard from you. Tell us about yourself.
I'm 16, and I guess my favorite part of American history is prohibition.
Is what?
Prohibition?
Prohibition. Okay, can you tell everyone what prohibition is?
When America tried to ban alcohol,
So why is that your favorite part?
because it shows how much of a failure it was.
Okay, great. So Tina likes to point out the failures of our country. We have many, some are funnier than others. That one was pretty funny. Okay, so America, if you don't know, in like the early 1900s, a lot of like high-minded elites were like, hey, we need to have everyone stop drinking alcohol. And they thought that would work. It did not work. People did not stop drinking alcohol. So that got repealed. So we'll talk about failures. We'll talk about some pretty sad ones. We'll talk about some more funny and ones like prohibition. There's just a lot of interesting stuff to go around. Okay, Tina, where are you from?
I'm from Missouri.
Is that how you pronounce it?
How else do you pronounce it?
I thought it was Missouri. Like
Yeah,
misery
Missouri.
just sounds like misery, like it's terrible.
It kind of is equal.
Okay, well, I'll make it a point not to go there then. Okay, let's hear from Ethan. Tell us about yourself.
I'm Ethan. I'm 14.
Favorite part of American history?
I don't really know.
Okay. What's the favorite thing, the most interesting thing you think America has done in like in the time you were alive? Just one thing you think America did that was interesting.
2020.
You think they did 2020?
Okay, what they did in 2020 was very interesting.
Okay, so are you talking about like the COVID type stuff?
Basically everything.
Everything they did. Yeah, America had a pretty busy 2020, as did a lot of places around the world. I think we all remember. You guys remember that, right? You're not like 5 or 6, right? You remember that. Okay, I'm just trying to make sure. I'm not good at ages with like you young people. So just wanted to make sure. Okay, yeah, that was a very interesting time in our history and a very transformative one. And one thing I hope with, again, another, trying to mix in my little lecture tidbits while we're doing this intro stuff. Another thing I hope you keep in mind as we talk about history, and I'll keep reminding you of this, is to think of everything in history as a lesson or as something to process what we're doing going forward. It literally, it does not matter what happened in history. It literally does not matter at all if it doesn't affect our decisions in the future, our decisions in the present. So like the only reason we study history is to learn more about what we should be doing now and what our future is going to look like and how we can make that better. Otherwise, there's kind of no point. So we have to learn lessons from 1820 to see what it can mean for how we should act in 2020. And we also have to learn lessons from 2020 to see how we should act in 2022. We're constantly learning from recent and faraway history. Okay, who else? Oh, wait, back to Sebastian. I forgot to ask you. So I asked you what your favorite part of American history is. What's your favorite part of Hong Kong history?
Hong Kong history isn't really that interesting until the British came around, but I would say around the same time period, right? Like the civil unrest that was going on in the early 20th century.
Okay, so like the kind of things that transformed like Hong Kong, made it more independent, things like that.
No, not really. It's just I don't even know. I haven't done that much Hong Kong history.
Okay, what's your favorite thing of non-American history, Sebastian?
Um,
We'll come back to you. Who have I missed? Eddie, have you gone yet?
No.
Okay, first step 1, turn your camera on. Be like the cool kids. All the cool kids have their camera on and they don't play video games secretly on their phone. Okay, so Eddie, tell us about who you are, where you're from, and what your favorite or most interesting part of American history is to you.
So my name is Eddie. I'm 13. I'm from California, and my favorite part of American history is probably the War of 1812.
The War of 1812, that is an interesting choice. Most people would not say that, to be fair, because most Americans don't know what the War of 1812 is. So good job. You're better at this than most Americans. Okay. Anyone else? No, I think we're good. Daniel, turn your camera on. Okay. So, does anyone have any questions, comments, anything to say before we start in earnest? Ethan, is that a question? No? Oh, go ahead.
No.
No. Oh, I was right. I see. I predicted your answer. I used history to predict the future. Okay. So, very quick lecture time. Most of this class won't be lecture. It's not that interesting to me. And it's not really going to help you if I just am talking at you the entire time. Much of it will be either in small groups or with me, like questions, like me posing questions to you and asking you to figure out what happens. Which brings me to the bigger point I want to get across to you now. I want you to think about America right now. Can you just tell me what's the first city that comes to your mind, Serena, when you think of America?
Wait, did you ask me?
Yeah, Serena.
I didn't hear my name. Can you repeat your question?
What's like the first city that comes to your mind when you think of this country of America?
Probably the city, like probably New York City.
New York City. I think most people's first city, like raise your hand if New York is the first that comes to mind for you. That is for me, and I think it is for most people. So Serena, tell us just, I mean, have you been to New York?
Yeah.
Can you tell me what does it look like? Just tell me a bit about the place.
I mean, there's a lot of skyscrapers. There's a lot of work buildings. And yeah.
Okay. So that's New York, Northeast America, huge city, 10 million people, like what is it, like 12 million people in the whole metro area. Huge city, skyscrapers, financial center of America. Okay, so that's there. That's in America. Then I'm not from there. I go to college in Massachusetts, but I live in Minnesota. So in Minnesota, it's a lot more spread out. There's, some, like I live in a small city, Rochester, Minnesota, a pretty suburban area. Pretty different from New York City. There's no skyscrapers here. It's just, single family homes. Who here is from a suburban area? Just like, smallish town, not New York City, not Boston. Okay, who's here is in a suburb, lives in a suburb of a big city? Even if you live near a big city, you live in a more spread out area. Okay, a lot of us. I think most of us don't live in, New York City high rises or Bay Area, like San Francisco apartment complexes or whatever. Most of us live in the suburb of a big city or a smaller town or stuff like that. That's where most Americans live. And then if I drive a little bit outside of my town, which is difficult because I can't drive, even though I should learn how, as my mom keeps telling me. But if I drive a little bit outside, there's just a bunch of farms, huge swaths of land with like a small little barn, small little house. That life is very different than my life in the suburbs. It's a very different place. Anyone here live in a rural area on a farm? No? Okay. Not that many people, but a huge amount of area. Okay, so my question to you is why is that? Why is New York City where it is? Why isn't New York City where I am in the middle of Minnesota? Can anyone answer that? Why is New York City over there and not here? Sebastian? Also, what should I call you? Sebastian, or is there a shorter form?
Yeah, Sebastian is fine.
Okay, tell me.
I can't lower my hand. Okay, there we go. So New York City was established by colonists, right? So it had a lot of history and time to grow big, and obviously, if it was in the middle of Minnesota, it would take a long time for the city to appear, and people couldn't really conveniently move there or anything. And so since it was on the East Coast.
Okay, so you're bringing up a lot of good points. So you're saying it's established by colonists, and then you gave a little bit why it was established there. So, but I want to push you a little further, Sebastian. So can you give me a straight answer? Why didn't the colonists, why didn't they come here? Why didn't they come to Minnesota? Why did they choose to create in New York City a colony rather than a giant one here?
Because they came via ship. They weren't going in. They had to create settlements.
Yeah, it is kind of difficult to carry a ship to Minnesota. We're not very good with oceanic travel. We're not great for that. Yeah, that's kind of it. Like, there's a reason New York City is where it is, and there's a reason there's a bunch of giant cities on the East Coast and the West Coast because of ships. Because that's how ships could get there. Trade could happen. Colonists could come. Makes sense the way Sebastian puts it. Okay. Does anyone know why Chicago is where it is? Chicago is not, on the coast. It can't get any colonists from Europe. Why is Chicago where it is? Anyone here been to Chicago? Okay. Eddie, tell me what's right on what borders Chicago?
I don't remember much about Chicago because I moved out when I was like 2 years old. So
Okay, fair enough. Completely get leaving Chicago. Daniel, what?
Lake Michigan.
Lake Michigan. And Daniel, why might that be useful for a city?
Um, it's water.
It's water.
Yeah.
Serena, stop
I
laughing
mean,
at your brother. Go ahead, Daniel.
I don't know.
Okay, if you were living on you could choose a plot of land to set up your little merchant trading business. Would you choose Chicago or would you choose like the middle of nowhere, Rochester, Minnesota?
Chicago.
Why?
Well, I would choose that now because it's more populated.
Even back then, like what is useful about living right next to water?
You have like you have something to drink.
That is true, but what can I'll give you a hint. It can float on water. What can you do that can float on water?
Oh, boats.
Boats. And how might that be useful for you as a new merchant?
It can transport things quicker.
Exactly. It can
Yeah.
transport things quicker and cheaper. You can sell things in a lot grander of a scale. You could import a bunch of stuff by boat, by ship to your city, and then you can sell it to all the people there. So then a bunch of other people want to come there because they can buy things easily. Carpenters can buy wood and other things to build buildings easier. All those people who make clocks can buy the equipment to make clocks. So they'll all come to Chicago because they can buy the stuff from the merchants there easily. And then people who clean houses, people who work restaurants, people who provide services, now they all want to live there because there's all these people there and they want all those like shipbuilders and those merchants and those clockmakers and whatever, they all need to eat. They all need a place to sleep. They need hotels and restaurants and schools and all these things. So then teachers come and chefs come and everyone comes. And then a city is born. So the thing I want to get across to you is that continuity of stuff, that cause and effect relationship that is fundamental in history. Because I tell you these things and you know these things about America right now or the world right now. You know the skyscrapers of New York City. You know the bungalows of Texas, the lowland flat houses of Texas. You know the suburbs all across America, surrounding cities and then places like Rochester. You know farmland, you know tractors and all that stuff. But just 400 to 500 years ago, basically none of that was here. And definitely a few thousand years ago, none of that stuff was here. There were no skyscrapers. There were no suburbs. There were no tractors. There was very few farms. This place was forest and grassland, and it was biomes and ecosystems. It was not man-made. Yet somehow, in the course of 500 to 600 years, out of just nature stuff, all of this came. The cities, the suburbs, the farms, the bungalows, the houses, all of that came, and it didn't come in a uniform way. It came in a very diverse way. You got cities in some places and not in others. You don't have a giant city in Montana or Utah, but you have it in New York and in Boston. You don't have corn farms in Alaska or in Washington, but you have them in Minnesota and in Iowa. The story of America today, all the things we know about our country today, the cities, the people, the different jobs you work, it all came through a giant series of cause and effect that all started some 500 or 600 years ago, where it was tabula rasa, which means blank slate in Latin, where it was just nature. And then some colonists came, they mixed with some of the native people here. And through that new thing that started 500 years ago, they made decisions to create the start of businesses, the start of their farming operations, the start of very small things that started a domino effect. They looked at nature, they looked out at the country, And they didn't see any, they didn't say like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go to New York City because I want to work in finance and Wall Street. It wasn't that simple to them. It wasn't like I'm gonna go to Tina, where are you from again?
Missouri.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Missouri. And Tina, what is something that people do in your city?
They go to see like the St. Louis Arch.
Okay, so they didn't say like I'm gonna go to. Is there a river in your city?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. They didn't say like I'm gonna go to St. Louis to sell tickets to the St. Louis Arch. It wasn't that simple. What they did know is, hey, I'm exploring this part of a state that hasn't been named yet, just this plot of land, and I see this giant river there. Maybe I should like start selling things on boat over this river. And then that place over time, like we talked about with Chicago, eventually becomes St. Louis. They're like, hey, like I'm a colonist, Dutch colonists, and I'm coming over after this long trip. I'm not gonna bother going inland. I want to set up some trading operations. This giant port thing, this like piece of land, this island, looks pretty cool. So I'm gonna call it New Amsterdam, and I'm gonna set up my merchant operations here, and it'll eventually become New York City. These things don't just happen by accident. They happen because fundamental things cause us to change our decisions. And then that changes what the future. The waterway of St. Louis, that's why it exists in many, for a big reason at least. It started with nature. It started with the environment, and then the story grows from there. Okay? So as part of that, who wants to play a game? Anyone? Raise your hand if you want to play a game. I thought kids like to play games. Daniel really wants to play a game.
Well, you
Okay.
have to tell us what game we're gonna play first.
Well, it's an educational game that I have invented. Okay, it's either that or I just keep talking at you. So I'm just saying. There we go, Sebastian. So let us screen share. Oh, bother. Let's do this. Okay. So, can you all see my screen? Cool beans. First order of business, we have to decide what color the page should be. Any suggestions?
Looks fine as it is.
Yellow.
No one wants green? That doesn't look good?
It looks great.
Oh, wait, how about purple? Okay, it seems like we're getting some nods for purple. I'm gonna let Jason. What do you think about purple?
It's good.
Okay, Jason says it's good. He did not sound very passionate about it, but I'll believe him. So we're going with purple. So let's this is just a blank slate again, like I said. So I'm gonna play a little game with you. Let's just say we got a little piece of land. How should I draw the piece of land? Let's draw it in black. So here's some land, and it goes off in that direction. And out here we got some water. Okay. And we've got some trees here. That's a terrible green. I got some trees, like all that here. Maybe some beach, a little bit of beach here. More trees. Okay. So, pre-Europeans, you are a Native American tribe. You've lived here for a long time. This is your area. What do you do? First thing, what do you do like to eat? Like that's the most important thing. How do you get food? How do you survive?
We can catch fish, maybe.
Okay, fish. Good idea. Let's what color are fish? Anyone know? Never.
Gray.
Gray. Okay. Gray fish. That's like the most boring fish. Okay, see. The only fish I've ever eaten are the colorful goldfish. So these are fish, not okay, they're really bad fish, but they're fish. So there's fish there and you can catch them and you can eat them and survive. Okay, so what else could you do?
You can pick berries from the
Pick
tree.
berries. Okay, berries, I do know what color berries are. They're red, right? Did you know that the banana is a berry? It's a fun fact. Okay, so there's little berry bushes and maybe some people can go pick these berries. Okay, Dorcas, what do you think we could do to eat?
I mean, there should be a shark eating all your food,
A shark?
eating your fishes, so then you don't get food.
Okay, so there could be predators. We'll get to those in a second, but yeah, there could be predators that are taking away the food supply. I want to start first with the nice stuff, then we'll get to the scary stuff. Okay, so we got berries, we got fish. Maybe we could get a some animal. I'll put a little speech bubble. Moo. That is a cow or something like that. But anyway, so we could eat the cow, or we could hunt that. We could gather some berries. We might be able to find some underground plants, get some fish, that sort of stuff. Okay, so where would you guys choose to live if you were this tribe? Would you choose to live here, or maybe here, or maybe floating on the ocean? What would you do? Serena?
I'll probably do the middle arrow because it's sort of surrounded by trees, so you're rather safe, but it has to be a clearing.
Yeah, so that's a really good rationale. If you live here, well, then you are not exposed to the elements as much if you live out in the open on a beach. You're a little more protected for like winds, rain, stuff like that, flooding. But you can just quickly, walk out, get fish. You can also go into the forest, get berries. It's a great location. But you'd probably live here. Like this would be your houses. This is terrible. You'd set up some houses here, stuff like that. I'll ask you another question, Serena. You get all of this. This is your area. Would you choose to leave this place a lot, or would you choose to stay? If the weather is like, let's just say it's like California area, the weather is pretty good. Would you choose to like walk inland a lot or like be nomadic? Or would you choose to kind of just set up permanent houses here?
I mean, to be honest, like I think I would explore a bit because there's like a forest and there's probably a lot of berries there.
Okay.
I would also try to go
That
fishing.
makes sense. I agree with you to explore a bit, but I'm saying what I mean by like exploring or by like moving around is not like exploring like 10 miles. I mean like moving like 100 or 200 miles and leaving your house, like not having a permanent house. So would you rather like go around a lot or maybe just like build a permanent house in this situation?
I mean, I would love to go with like search parties that like go and find new land. but like I would probably be pretty satisfied with where I am now.
Yeah, it's a pretty nice location. You were thinking kind of like I would think, like I want to build an empire. We need to find new land. We need to like create like this big thing. But for most people, if you're just trying to get by, you're just trying to get food, you're just like, we got fish most of the time, like when the sharks aren't there, as Dorcas said. We got berries during the summer months or something like that. This cow, somehow it always just keeps popping up over and over again. Life's pretty good here. I don't need to keep leaving. I'm just gonna create some like real house, proper wooden house, build it out of log cabins, stuff like that. My small little river tribe or ocean tribe, we're just gonna stay around here. Okay. Now scenario number 2. We are now in the middle of the country. So, these are kind of we don't need borders. We're just in the middle of the country. And there's no trees. There's some trees, but it's mostly just grass. Okay, this is grass. Imagine there's grass. Maybe a little lake, something like that. Few proper trees, not that many. Okay, so we got a lot of grass. One second. And, got some rabbits. Those are rabbit ears, by the way. Got that cow has somehow gotten here. Still saying moo, except in probably a new language. You got a turkey. That's a person, not a turkey. I don't know how to draw a turkey. Anyway, you got a turkey. It's got 4 legs. Okay. So this is grasslands. This is like Minnesota or Wisconsin or Iowa. This one up here, this is like Washington State. This is like Oregon, California. This is Minnesota, Iowa. What do you do here? You're having a little, like, you have your family here, a little extended family, small little tribe going. What do you do to survive? Let's start with the eating part, most important part. See, when people don't volunteer, then I have to call on people. And I mean, it's fun for me. It's less fun for you. Okay. You know what is extra fun for me? Hi, Tina. Hi. So you don't have to go, Tina. You don't have to say anything, but you get to call on the person. So that way they get mad at you and not me. So go ahead.
Dorcas.
Dorcas. See, it's Tina's fault, really. Blame Tina. Okay, go ahead, Dorcas. What do you think you're gonna do to eat around here?
I guess just I guess just like kill the cow and then eat it.
Okay, I see Dorcas plays a lot of violent video games. So he says, go after the cow. What would you do, Ethan?
I could like look for edible plants.
Okay, maybe there'll be like a little underground. This is underground. A little carrots or something like that. You go after those. Underground storage organs, underground plants are a huge source of nutrition for a lot of hunter-gatherers, which are like people who don't farm yet. Okay. What about you, Daniel? What would you do?
I would look for the animals to eat.
Okay, you'd focus on the animals. Maybe check the ponds to see if there's like some fish. Ponds are probably fresh water, so you might be able to drink from that. Stuff like that. Okay. Go after that weird turkey. Okay. So, Serena, you look frustrated. So that's what I'm calling you. So, Serena, we got all this stuff going, but Minnesota's cold. I mean, it gets really cold in the winter. It's pretty nice in the summer. So, Serena, are you gonna stick around here for the winter, or are you maybe gonna walk down to Texas because there's no cars yet?
I'll probably go like a little bit south, but like probably not that far because if it gets too cold, people will die.
Yeah, I mean, walking is difficult, but yeah, like you'd probably keep on the move. You'd be nomadic, which means like kind of like a people that are on the move. You probably won't build a full-on like log sturdy house because you won't be in the same place for that long. There's not there's like not like a steady source of food. Like in the ocean over here, there's always fish. You can always get fish. Fish aren't gonna go away. More fish will swim in when other fish leave. But here, you might hunt an area pretty quickly, like 10, 20 square miles. You might hunt all the cows that are there, or many of the rabbits or stuff like that, for your tribe. So eventually, you want to get moving to a new area where there's more animals, stuff like that, more carrots, whatever. So you might build temporary housing, like a teepee, instead of like a log cabin, something that can keep you safe and secure in like rain, wind, whatever. Nice place to sleep, safe from the bears, but capable of being moved easily or remade, rebuilt pretty easily. So the people who would be around here would live pretty differently. One more thing, let's ask Sebastian. So these people over here, let's use this arrow. They got access to fresh water in the ponds. It's not very clean. I do not recommend you guys go around drinking pond water, but it is at least fresh water. It's drinkable. But what about these guys over here? What are they going to do to get water? Sebastian?
They can. It's interesting.
I'll give you a hint. Water could be on the side over here. It could be anywhere on the side of them. But water also comes from another direction.
So they would be able to. They would be able to somehow get rainwater.
Exactly. Exactly, Sebastian. Cool beans. So they could collect rainwater. They could, when a storm comes, they could leave out large, like they could stitch together some like tree bark or straw or something, lead out these large waterproof nets to catch water, and then keep that. So I'm not saying that every tribe did this or whatever, but what I want you to understand is that nature not only drives where we live, what we eat, whether we're nomadic or we live in one place. It drives all of that, but it also drives our technology and our culture. It drives the things we choose to build. Like this sort of civilization needs to innovate exactly what Sebastian just innovated, some sort of device that will capture rainwater so that they have fresh water to drink regularly, rather than having to go to like distant lakes or something like that. That drives their innovation. It drives their technology. In many ways, these areas will drive their religious beliefs. Like you'll see a lot more water-related gods when it comes to tribes that like Native American tribes that lived near the water, versus here you'll see more land or sky-related gods. So much of what people are, and especially what we used to be before we had all these fancy skyscrapers and iPads and whatever, it was just driven by the things around us. Where could we get food? What could we do to survive in this area? Do we have to leave for the winter? Is it cold? Is it warm? Is there fresh water, or do I need to learn how to get fresh water? these basic questions of survival and maintaining our tribe, that's what really dictated a lot of how Native Americans lived. It also dictated how Europeans and Asians and Indians lived, usually a little bit further back in history. Like for Europeans, they started farming like, what is it, 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. In like Asia, that's like 6,000 years ago, 7,000 years ago. And same like Africa, India is like 7,000 or 8,000 years ago. But before that, and Native Americans up till like 500 years ago, at least in North America, very often were hunter-gatherers. They were using the environment in this way. You know, they'll go fishing if there's fish there. They'll collect berries if you can gather berries. Hunt moose if you can hunt moose. Do what you can to survive. Okay. So that's the first stage of civilization. Humans all started out this way across the world. So already we can start to see how the environment, the tabula rasa, just the biomes and ecosystems of this country, are dictating the first stages of its human history for Native Americans. Okay, cool beans. Are there any questions about this part of it? Okay, so this is all well and good, but as you all know, we move past this. We move past just gathering berries. America changes. And one event, one thing happens that really starts all this change. So you have Native Americans, many tribes, some are pretty advanced, some are not very advanced, some are small, some are big, but most of them are living in a way that is akin to this, hunting and gathering. What changes? Why does America change after that? So who came here in 1492? Does anyone remember? Who came to see the Americas in 1492?
Columbus.
Columbus and his associates. America is transformed. The first transformative thing you should know for the continent of North America, and really both North and South America, is in the context of American history, US history, is the arrival of Columbus and the discovery of the new world, as it was called, the Americas, by the Europeans. They didn't know we were here. Most of them didn't, at least. They didn't know there was a giant amount of land just sitting there, you know, just a few thousand miles away across the Atlantic Ocean. Does anyone, Jason, do you remember why Columbus came here? What was he trying to do?
Find spice.
Yeah, and he wasn't trying to find spice here. He was trying to find it in India, in the West, in the Indies, West Indies. He wanted to go find it in Asia. And his brilliant idea was, you know, everyone's trying to go through Europe and into Asia. Let me draw it out. So this is going to be extremely bad looking, but here we got that is terrible. Let me try this again. This is North America. On a scale of 0 to 10, how bad is that, Tina? How good is that, Tina?
It's a 7 out of 10.
That I'm thank you. Thank
It's
you.
wonderful.
That's so nice. You're not just sucking up, right?
Yeah, I'm not just looking up.
Sure. Okay, I believe you. So we got Asia here. We got Africa here. Whatever, fine, I'll put in stupid Australia there. Okay, and Christopher Columbus's brilliant idea was, how about we go from Spain here, and if we go this way, we'll eventually reach here, instead of having to go all the way around Africa and go that way or something like that for shipping. Well, he was right about the Earth, you know, working in a globular fashion, not being flat. However, he was very, very wrong about what he would run into. He runs into, well, he doesn't actually reach continental America, but he runs into an island there. And you have the rest is somewhat history, as we will learn. So that is the transformative moment when the Europeans discover America and they start colonizing it. But before we do that, talk about that, I want to talk about why did the Europeans discover America? Why did they do this now and not before? And why did they choose to colonize America? What was motivating all of that? So let's take a step back to talk about the why, not just that this happened, but why did it happen? Okay. Oh, no. Okay. First thing, can everyone go to Google Classroom and do this? Let me just type this in this message in the chat so y'all have a chance to fill it in. Okay, I'm gonna be like a YouTube comment section. The person who writes first gets a reward because they do that on YouTube, I've learned. No one's done it yet. The reward is excellent. Why is it is?
Wait, right first where?
What do you mean?
Wait, what did you say before?
Oh, text it in the chat once you're done.
Oh, oh. Oh, I put it in
Can't say
the
I'm
I
in
put it in the
because-
Google Classroom.
Okay, I guess you can put it in the Google Classroom.
No, but I put it in at 9.
Okay,
So
It
I
is-
won.
let's see if there's any. Does everyone agree Daniel won? Any disagreements? Even Tina agrees. You're a good sport, Tina. Good job. Okay, Tina, because you agreed, you get a different reward. I need to think of rewards. Okay, so Daniel, you get a gold star for being first. And Tina gets a gold star for being nice. I'll just put this one out there. Serena, you can get a gold star too if you find a way to make fun of your brother. I'm just saying, like dangling that reward for you, testing your loyalties. Okay, so yeah, just everyone join the Google Classroom. We'll, it'll be the place where I post all the recordings and any homework and all that fun stuff. So do that. Okay, does anyone need a little more time? Are we all good? Cool. So, I mean, we got a slide deck. We got slide decks that I've had made for all these stuff, but we probably won't go through them slide by slide. I prefer to discuss things with you and do it that way rather than like, writing it out, hearing what you guys have to think rather than just reading stuff off the slide. But there's some stuff we should do this way. So let's start with this. We got very different environments in both places. We've been talking about how important nature is. It's not just like, you go to some park, you go enjoy yourself in a forest. It is true that in the day and age, very few of us actually like live in the middle of a nature preserve or in the middle of Yellowstone or whatever. But you have to remember that not that long ago, most of this continent was just nature. And a few thousand years ago, most of everywhere was just nature. So we got to think about how did nature start the dominoes falling for the different things that happen in American history. Here's where one thing that's really important. What crops and animals grew in each location? the Americas, North and South America, had very different animals and crops and plants than the plants that were in Europe. So Europe, they're coming here they're like, whoa, these plants are weird, these animals are weird. How can we use them? How can we start farming them? How can we start turning them into a source of income and food and transport? So can you guys look at this list just for a minute? I want everyone to look at this. Actually, better yet, I'm going to put you guys into breakout rooms, and I want you to talk with each other and discuss what are the important things on this list that when they go from America to Europe, they change the game in Europe, or from Europe to America, they change the game in America. The transformative things on this list. Does that make sense? Everyone? Tina, what did I want you to do?
Good question.
Okay, good. I felt I was being quite unclear. So what I want you to do is say like, okay, we have squash that's only native to America. It doesn't exist in Europe. Now Europeans come and now they can have squash in Europe. How does that change Europe to have squash there? Maybe not that much, but I'll give you a hint. For example, tobacco wasn't a thing in Europe beforehand. It was in America. But now that Europeans can access tobacco, smoking, stuff like that, how does it change Europe? How does it become important to Europe? So I want you to discuss that sort of thing. What happens when tobacco becomes accessible to Europe? What happens when horses and cows become accessible to Americans, native to the native population in America? That sort of thing. So I'll create the rooms. If you guys are still confused, I'll be moving around the rooms to help you out. So go right ahead.
There was an Irish. Yeah, that's what I had to say.
Are we talking about prohibition again?
We're talking about the Irish potato famine, which is arguably just as funny.
Okay. Sure. I guess. Okay. Never mind.
It was not funny. Okay, I was just talking.
Okay. Anyway. Yeah. So here, let me I want you guys to I'm gonna share my screen. Oh wait, no. Sorry, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna type a few things that are American. That were in America originally. And a few things that were in Europe originally. And I want you to tell me how these things influenced everything. Like, what did they do to change each continent when they got moved to the other place, when Europeans had access to tobacco and horses had access, and Americans had access to Native Americans. So just start talking about that, become friends, and then I'll come back in a bit to check on you guys.
Okay.
So in the chat, I've pasted something I want you to look at. So I just chose 3 things from the list that Americans had, 3 things from the list Europeans had. I want you to tell me what they did when they moved to the other place. So let's start with you, Sebastian. What do you think?
I guess.
Okay, go ahead.
No, what were you going to say?
I was just gonna ask what you thought, but just go ahead.
I think horses were pretty suitable for the plains in America.
Okay, so
Like,
why do you think horses would have helped out with the plains?
Well, you could. Well, with horses, you could. Well, with horses later on, they actually later on when the entire East Coast was settled, they allowed the settlers to cross the plains.
Okay, so they allowed you to cross, like, America is a huge, like, just the US area is huge.
Yeah.
So horses are a big deal in traversal, right?
Mhm.
Yep, you're completely right. For what else do you think horses can do over here?
Well, they can carry. Well, they can carry your stuff.
Yeah, exactly. They can carry things, so they can not only move you quickly, they can also move stuff for merchants, stuff like that. Okay, so that's horses. Daniel, what do you think about so tobacco was something native to the Americas. How does that change what Europeans do now that they have access to this tobacco thing, this very intoxicating, addictive substance? Daniel? Okay, go ahead.
Well, like people, I don't know, people got addicted to it, and like it was a whole new market, and because like it was addictive, it like it was great for the economy because people were trading it.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it becomes an economic thing. So if you're like, let's just say you're some European colonists, you find this crop that everyone in Europe now loves because they're all like, all these rich people, they want to buy this tobacco thing to smoke it. So what would you do with your colony?
Wait,
If you wanted to,
I have a colony that has tobacco,
yes,
and I
you have a
want to sell
colony
it.
that has the plant that can at least grow the plant tobacco.
Well, I would bring it back to Europe and sell it to them.
Okay, and you would, what would you do to in your colony? Would you start growing it more, like set up farms or
Yes.
something?
Yeah.
Okay, so you'd set up these like large farms to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, and who would you get to do the work on those farms?
Slaves.
Well, I'm assuming you wouldn't do that, but that's what
Oh,
people did.
well, yeah.
Yeah. So originally it was like indentured servants, like people who were like just pretty poor from like England or like, France
Yeah.
or whatever. But eventually it becomes slaves. Like you're right. You're right. But again, I'm hoping you're seeing, Daniel, that like all these things that we know to happen in history, like plantations, slavery, things like that in American history, big things, they all started with some basic forces of nature. There is a place in this giant thing that is called America that can grow tobacco real easily. So how about we just set up farms for that and do what you just said a colonist would do? Okay, so I want you guys to talk about the other four. Sebastian, you take the lead, and I will recall the breakout rooms in a few minutes.
Well, sugar. Well,
Almond,
We discussed all the 6 words you told us.
you did. Good job. Okay, so what did you think about for horses? Horses moving to the Americas.
It basically made, first of all, movement was more efficient, increased competition between tribes, and also provided more efficient ways for hunting, I'd say.
Okay, so a lot of movement, carrying goods, makes hunting easier, all that sort of stuff for both colonists who are coming here and also for natives, if they manage to trade for horses or stuff like that. So if you were like a native tribe, you'd probably really want these horses, especially if you live in the plains and need to move around a lot, right? And need to move for hunting. Does that make sense, Tina? Everyone? Okay, so what you'd probably be willing to do a lot of trade with colonists who can bring you these horses, who can give you these horses stuff. So horses, along with a few other things, but horses were one of the fundamental things that started trade for in the Americas. Oh, 1 second. Let's see, I just need to plug in my computer. So think about again like the broader implications of each one of these things. It's not just like a horses can help you transport stuff, but as a trade asset, they started original relationships between Native Americans and colonists. They established, for example, relationships with the French who wanted to trade for furs and like furs that were really valuable in Europe. So they traded horses and guns and metal pots and stuff like that. So one really important part of the original story of America is two very different groups of people, European colonists and Native American tribes, wanting the things that the other people are good at getting and trading for it. Oh wait, I'm gonna close the breakout rooms and we can talk in the big group since you guys are done. Hi, friends. Tina says hi. Thank you, Tina. Eddie also says hi. Thank you, Eddie. Serena, come on. You're just being a copycat by this point. They already said hi. I'm joking. I'm always happy when people say hi. Okay. So, you guys, I was hearing some really good ideas when we were talking in small group. One moment. And wanted to highlight some really important ones first. So, like, probably of this list, a lot of these animals and plants are really important, but the three most important ones would be tobacco, sugarcane, and horses, probably. They're going to change a lot how the world works. These random plants and one animal. So, from Tina, who in your group do you think is an expert on telling us about horses?
I think it's Serena. I would have said Eddie, but he just left the seat.
Okay, since Eddie went AWOL, Serena. Oh, Eddie's back. Eddie's back. Okay, Eddie, tell us why horses? Why do they matter?
Because you could move faster on them, and you can hunt faster, and you can kill other people faster.
Okay, wait. Let's go to the killing other people faster. And just as a quick disclaimer, I am not encouraging killing people on horses. However, we will talk about killing people on horses. So, Eddie, tell us, why is the horse important in warfare? What can it do to make you have an advantage in battle?
It can make you faster.
It can make you faster. And how does that help?
Because like you can chase other people.
Okay, so the horse can be a big advantage. You can chase people. You can use the horse to attack. A horse is a very strong beast. You can use it to like have cavalry horse charges where you attack a city with on horseback, and basically just like run through the city and destroy it. So these things matter in a lot of different ways. Let's go through them. So one is Europeans bring horses when they start coming here. That's a big deal because, like you said, it can be used for them to explore. They can move around, stuff like that. But for native tribes, especially ones that are yeomen, they're nomadic. They move around the plains. They move around the Northeast. The ones that don't stick in place, they're like, oh wow, we need those horse things. We got to trade for those horse things because they're gonna, make our life so much easier. We can move around way faster. We can carry our stuff with us. We can hunt way easier, just like Eddie said. But then in other places, horses are basically like, they make you so much more powerful for warfare. So not so much in the United States area of America, but in Mexico and in South America, you have these much larger civilizations, the Aztecs, the Incas, if you've heard of them. Pretty powerful. They have big cities. They have all that sort of stuff. They have farms, unlike higher like parts of like where the U.S. is right now, which are still hunter gatherers. They got all these stuff down there. They have these cities, but they lost pretty quickly to the European invaders. A big part of that was having a military advantage. The Europeans come with ships. They come with horses. This like just this new thing called the horse that can take them around really fast and be super useful in war. They have guns, stuff like that. So big advantage for them. Same thing all over the Americas, a big military advantage that in the United States helps the Europeans make their foothold, control land, keep away Native Americans and small squabbles. But in Central and South America, like in Mexico, and Chile and stuff like that, it's used to conquer by Spain. They come and they can conquer with all those weapons and with the horse. So the horse just going from one continent to another, it changes trade, it changes the lives of hunter-gatherers, and it changes warfare in the Americas. Okay, Daniel, tell us why we should care about tobacco being available in Europe.
Because Europeans like they were addicted to and they wanted it, so like Americans could sell it to them.
Yeah, I mean, like if we even go back further back in the cause and effect chain, like why does tobacco grow in the Americas, in like the warmer parts of the Americas, and not in Europe? Because the climate is better. Because like, you know, if you look down south here, you got these like nice temperatures. You got all this nice stuff over you know, over here and all that stuff. Pretty nice temperatures. It's humid, it's good for the tobacco crop. It can thrive there. So we got all this land that's not that many people are using. It can grow this crop, tobacco, that everybody wants. So how about we go set up some farms there and then ship the tobacco back to Europe so that they can all buy it and smoke it and get addicted to it. And that's one of the major reasons a colony might form. That we can set up these pretty lucrative, like very valuable, like farming establishments in the southern parts of the what will become the United States, because we can sell these new crops, these things like tobacco that can grow here, back to places in Europe where tobacco doesn't grow or can't really grow because of the weather. Same thing if you come out a little bit further to like this area. Not part of the US, but it's the same thing with sugarcane. Everybody in Europe wants sugar. Sugar is sweet. We all love sugar even now. But sugar grows so well here in this like very southern area of the Central and South America. It just grows really well there. It doesn't grow that well in Europe. So what do you do if you're an entrepreneuring businessman or a king or a colonist? You're like, hey, let's go set up a colony in these areas. Let's take over the land and let's just start growing sugar. Then we can ship it back to Europe and, you know, have sugar in our tea. Cool beans? Cool beans. Okay. So, that's enough with the slides. Let's take a step back. So, oh wow, this is such a beautiful map. Wonder who made it. So we got this thing going on. Let's actually stick to the map for a second. We got this thing going on where there is all this lucrative stuff that can happen via trade, via all that sort of stuff. But why in the first place did Europeans suddenly want to find out what was going on across the ocean? What motivated this change? Because they spent thousands of years just sitting in Europe. Why did they suddenly start sailing this way? So one of the big things, and this has to be in black to start out. Actually, I don't want to put it in black because it might become invisible. So we have to remember that some of the basic tenets of European history to understand where American history starts. So who here's heard of the Roman Empire? So Rome, huge empire around the year 0, basically. It was kind of like 500 BC to 500 AD. Long time ago, 2,000 years ago, very dominant. So Europe was actually getting pretty advanced, you know, kind of like some of the empires of China and India. They were getting pretty advanced through Rome. But unlike, like, for example, the Chinese, some various dynasties and stuff like that, the European empires, the big European empires, like the big civilizations, they kind of started collapsing around the years 400, 500, and we entered what is called the Middle Ages. and many people would call it the Dark Ages. It's kind of where Europe regresses. There's like a lot of famine, there's a lot of plagues. It kind of devolves from like big empires, big technology, great monuments and structures and aqueducts and all those cool stuff. And it becomes a bunch of tiny little kingdoms or princedoms, each with their little small castle with their little knights and their soldiers and whatever. It's kind of where you get the our current day when we think of knights and all that sort of stuff, castles, all from that era. So instead of being one large empire, like China was at the time, like Rome used to be, it was just a bunch of small little what are called serfs. You'd have some lord, and he'd control a bunch of peasant farmers who would work on his land. They wouldn't own the land. And then he would have a kid, and then his kid would own the land, and then the peasants would have kids, and then the peasant's kid would work on the land, and they wouldn't own the land. And this just happened generation after generation, centuries of this, where there were just these small little lordships and kingships and princedoms where nothing changed. You had a kid, well, the kid did what you used to do. If you were a lord, that meant they got to be a lord. If you were a peasant, that meant they were a peasant. There was no mobility. There was no change. The economy didn't grow. Technology didn't progress. The church was dominant, and there was basically no new art, no new literature, no new science, no mobility. You couldn't not be a peasant. If you started out a peasant, you'll end a peasant. You're born a peasant, you'll die a peasant, and your kids will die a peasant, and your great, 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 great grandkids will die a peasant. Things did not change. They were just the same. Okay? So that was Europe during the Middle Ages. That's from the year like 600 to like 1300. Then what happened? Why did they snap out of it? That's where we encounter the Black Death, the plague. So no, that's wrong. So y'all have lived through COVID, which has been pretty terrible in a lot of different ways. So COVID has unfortunately killed quite a lot of people. It's hurt quite a lot of families, stuff like that. In America, it's killed, I think, over 1 million people now. So what's the population of America? Does anyone know? Okay, Eddie says no. So what does that mean we should do? Look it up. First person to type it in the chat gets a reward. Okay, I think Ethan is right. We are slightly larger than 228. I think we are 330 million people about. Eddie is even more precise. So Ethan, I'm going to give you a silver star. Eddie, I'll give you a bronze star for adding the significant decimal point. But anyway, so 330 million people. So about a little over 1 million people have died. So that's 1 out of 330 people. It's a lot of people. Exactly 228. Maybe a long, long time ago. Okay, so in percentage form, that's about like 0.3% of our population. The Black Plague, it killed 1 in 3 Europeans at least. It was one disease that wiped out a third, 33% of the European population. Basically, like most diseases just don't even come close to that. 33% of an entire continent just died within the span of like 20 years. Everyone, popes died, kings died. Families almost invariably would lose many family members. Like I can't even imagine this, but it's just like on a scale so much bigger than even something like COVID. So like just try to put yourself in those shoes. Like you have this whole thing going where generation after generation, for centuries, you've lived the same way. If you're a lord, your kid is a lord, your grandkid is a lord. If you're a peasant, you never own any land, you never can grow, you can never become a lord or anything. You just stay peasant, and then your kids are peasant. You've lived that way for a really, really long time. And then suddenly, 1/3 of your population just goes. And it doesn't matter if you were a lord, it doesn't matter if you were a peasant. Everybody has basically equal chance of dying. There's no medicine at the time to save you. There's no vaccines or Paxlovid or anything. So that just happens. Okay. So Eddie, with that in mind, with this cataclysmic, this apocalyptic event happening, how do you think that would change the status quo, the normal way of thinking? How would that change Europe? Get it out of its just, monotony?
People would be more scared, I guess.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of fear. You're completely right, Betty. But let's talk about things that'll be like permanent changes. So for one, do you think that this would increase the chance that social structures will get remade? Like if 1/3 of your population dies, well, it kind of makes staying the same more difficult, right, Eddie? Like it makes it more difficult to just say like, oh, hey, we're going to keep this lordship here, and we're going to keep these farmers here, and we're these peasant farmers, and we're going to keep this shoemaker and this barkeep in their existing places. Well, if like your lords are all dead and your shoemaker is dead, well, you got to get somebody to be in charge. You got to get somebody to make shoes. You got to get somebody to manage the bar. So this kind of massive, almost extinction level event, it kind of makes this whole serfdom, this feudal, it's called the feudal system. This feudal system has to kind of collapse somewhat, because you can't stick to it when 1/3 of your population has died, and many important positions, whether it's in leadership or in the merchant class or in the build carpenters, shoemakers, whatever, if they're dead in your little village, somebody has to go do that. So after all that time, there starts to just be a little bit of social mobility. Peasants can now move up the ladder a bit. They can start to work as merchants. They can start to work as carpenters. Things start changing. Also, small little baby civilizations, they start growing a bit bigger, because when 1/3 of your population dies, you have to band together with other things, whether it's through war and conquering your neighbors or through diplomacy. You start seeing larger civilizations that had not been seen in a long time since the Roman Empire start to form again. And lastly, this kind of thing, it makes everyone somewhat rethink. One second, let me put this on. Okay, so it makes everyone kind of rethink their relationship with the church. So Christianity, like, spread as a religion starting, as literally like around the year 0. It became dominant in Europe around the year like 400 or 500, where most people were Christians. But Christianity then is very different than Christianity today, or at least like how most people experience Christianity, whether you're religious or not. Christianity in the Middle Ages, in this time, was basically all encompassing. Your entire life revolved around the church. The church was the real power in Europe. The Pope was the real power in Europe. Everyone was Catholic. There was no other, there was kind of Eastern Orthodox, but basically everyone in most of Europe is just Catholic. They all see the Pope as the ultimate figure, and everything revolves around churches. But then when 1/3 of the population dies, people start to become a little less tied to that order, that way of looking at the church, that the church is going to dominate everything. They're going to fix everything. They're going to do everything. That would make sense when 1/3 of your population dies. So we start to see a revitalization of art, of sculpture, of science, of writing, called the Renaissance. The Renaissance period that comes out of the Black Death. Out of the Black Death, we see the end or the beginning of the end to the feudal system. And we see creation of larger states. Larger states, by states I mean civilizations. Civils. And then we also see the Renaissance period, which is basically after centuries of Europe just kind of not writing anything that wasn't relating to the church, not caring about science, not making any art that wasn't strictly adhering to the church guidelines. We start to see everything change slowly but surely, starting around 1300. That's 700 years ago, 1300 to about 1500. We start to see these major changes in Europe, slowly but surely, starting in the south in like Italy, where the plague hits first and all that sort of things, and then moving up to Germany and moving up to England and stuff like that. We start to see art to change. And most importantly, we start to see people caring about advancement, about change again. Because during that entire Dark Age period, during that Middle Age period, it was all about there is God, there is the Pope, there is the religious hierarchy. That is absolute. That is just something completely separate. It's the only thing worth honoring. Our thing is just not important. It doesn't matter if I grow anything beyond being a peasant. I don't need to become anything more than a peasant. It doesn't matter if we change. It doesn't matter if we create new technologies. That was the belief during that period of time. But once the Renaissance come around, once this Black Death changes everything, well, then people are like, okay, maybe it does matter what we do. Maybe humans can create something of ourselves. Maybe humans, not just like religious figures, deserve to be honored in art or in sculpture. Maybe we should honor that great general or great king by making a beautiful portrait of them. Maybe science is important. Maybe we should try to advance ourselves through new technologies, make our civilization better. Maybe our civilization, like Florence in Italy or something like that, we can make it the best civilization there is. We can make it beat all the other civilizations. So for a long time in Europe, that Middle Age period, things just, you and I wouldn't be able to understand it if we went there. We wouldn't be able to wrap our heads around it because there was just a fundamental lack of care for growth, for change, either at an individual level or at a civilization level. Nowadays, it's just kind of internal to all of us. Like, we know the United States wants to grow. We know that we want to grow. We want to go to college and get good jobs. We want to get a better TV. We want to get a better smartphone. We want our country to succeed. So these things that are intrinsic to us, I think most of us at least, these pursuits, they just weren't there during this period in European history. And then suddenly they come back with the Renaissance. So we got these three big things. We see the end to the feudal system, where peasants just got to be peasants forever. We see the creation of larger civilizations, and we see the Renaissance. Okay, so now I've been talking long enough. Let's hear what you guys think this would do in terms of discovering the new world. So why do you think all this stuff helped cause Christopher Columbus to go sail the Atlantic Ocean? Why did this cause that to happen? Because it's no coincidence that the Black Death happens in the 1300s, and then the next century, Christopher Columbus goes and does this voyage, and colonization happens. It's no coincidence. So let's start with Sebastian. Why do you think all this stuff, the Black Death and the things it in turn caused, why do you think they contribute to Christopher Columbus's eventual voyage? Like, why did that voyage happen?
Mm, mm,
Let's start with the easiest one of the bunch. Let's start with this one. Creation of larger civilization. So now instead of just like, again, like 1/3 of the people die, 33% of the population dies, 1 in every 3. That would amount to like 4 people in this room alone, or 3 people in this room alone.
I feel,
And
well, I'm thinking
that,
of other unrelated reasons why Columbus.
oh yeah, tell us the unrelated reasons. This is like, I'm not saying it has to be confined to this stuff.
Like, for example, they had better ships.
Okay, so they had, wait, let's take a step back. What made Columbus want to sail across the sea? What was he looking for? I think you answered this before.
Like gold.
What?
Well, he was looking. Well, he was looking for. I guess not gold. Like he was trying to sail to India.
Yeah, exactly. And you're exactly right, Sebastian. And exactly what Jason said also. He was looking for spice.
Yep.
Okay. And then I'll ask you, Sebastian, was he looking for spice because, like, he was hungry? Is that why he did it? Or was it some other reason?
No, it's spice is worth a lot of money in Europe.
Okay.
Because
yeah, you're right. It's worth a lot of money.
It was rare and the Ottomans were blockading it.
Yep, it was very difficult to go across land. You're completely right about the Ottomans, which were like an empire, a Middle Eastern empire, to the east of Europe. So they stopped the land access. So, but like we were just talking about, the Middle Ages, people didn't care about creating economic ventures. They didn't care about creating good businesses, or kingdoms didn't really care about finding the spice trade. Why would, for example, the creation of larger civilizations, like moving from a small little village to having like these bigger kingdoms and stuff like that, why would that promote like a king, for example, the king of Spain, to be like, hey, let's go out and let's build the spice trade thing? Why would he want to do that?
Well, larger civilizations need more money to do things.
Yeah, they need more money. And like, and if we couple that with this one, the Renaissance, remember we were talking about how people started caring about change and winning. They wanted to be better. They wanted greatness. It wasn't just about, can I follow moral virtue by like going to church and being and like, listening to the church people, and then basically often just paying the bishop, because like at this time it's kind of corrupt. Like basically, if you did a sin, the way you absolved yourself of the sin was literally you just gave money to the local church. That is how they thought greatness was found in the Middle Ages. Like if you wanted to succeed, it was only about the church. But during this period, after during the Renaissance, greatness involves your own accomplishments beyond the church, beyond heaven or hell. It had to do with, for example, if you're a king, you want to be the best king. You want to beat the other people. You want to fight. And part of fighting is warfare. Part of fighting is just being economically way richer than everyone else. So then all these kings are like, how can we make ourselves rich? And the king of Spain is like, hey, Chris Columbus, can you go do that? Like, I'll give you the money. I want you to go build the spice trade up so that we can have the spice and, be super rich and way better than everyone else. Does that make sense, Sebastian?
I guess they wanted to compete with the Portuguese who were finding a spice trade as well.
Exactly. They wanted to compete. And like, even right before this, it's not just about sending ships like what'll eventually become America. They were also sending big expeditions to Africa and around Africa, around the bottom of Africa, like all the way, like kind of like this, to do a spice trade over here. They were doing all sorts of exploration, because when you start to care again about personal accomplishment, about the great things that people can do, not just what you can do morally and not just what you can do in relation to the church, but you care about individual accomplishments. That changes everything, because then kings and kingdoms, they start to care about money and success and technology and building the best spice trade. And a lot of these things are the fundamental motivations for why the original expeditions that discovered the New World were started. Okay, everyone punch the screen if that makes sense. Don't actually punch your screen, but fist bump. Does that make sense? Serena has her mouth open and is not punching the screen. So what's up, Serena?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the part what you were saying.
Which part?
What you just said. That we were supposed to be understanding.
Oh, okay. So let's just quick summary of where we are right now. We had Europe. It was in the Middle Ages. The church was the only thing that's important. Society never changed. You have this feudal system where lords just stay as lords, peasants never own land, they just stay as farmers forever. They have to serve the lords. You have that system. What happens? You got this Black Death and a few other things. This Black Death wipes out a third of the population. It reshuffles the deck in Europe. Now that feudal system starts to collapse, and you start to see the glimmers of a new civilizations in Europe that start to care more about individual accomplishment, not just the church, not just about moral virtue, not just about subscribing to what the church wants, but being great at human things, at the human level, being a great general in war, creating the best technologies, having the most beautiful artistic cities with the best sculptures and the best art. People start to care about that. Kings start to care about that. So with that in mind, Serena, if you were a king in Spain or a queen in Spain, Serena, and you have the opportunity to send out this voyage to maybe bring in this spice trade, start becoming really rich off of a spice trade where you can buy spices and sell them in Europe at a huge markup. Would you do that, Serena?
Yes.
Yes. And once you have this mindset again, this mindset that we're pretty familiar with and the Romans were pretty familiar with, but not really the middle-aged people. Once you have that mindset, that personal, individual, human level success is important, well, then it makes sense why shortly after this, you start to see expeditions to the New World in search of spice, in search of economic success. But just because they didn't find the spice, just because they didn't find that thing, though, I hope you understand why they still ended up doing what they did. Those motivations still are there, even though they didn't find spice. Like we talked about, they found tobacco. And Daniel, what would they do with the tobacco with this mindset?
Wait, what?
We talked about this new Renaissance era mindset. Now,
Yeah.
if you go and you find tobacco, this thing that everyone likes here in Europe, I'm not here, in Europe, what would you do with that tobacco? We talked about this in small group.
I would sell it back to Europe.
Yeah, you'd create farming operations. You'd create a sort of little colony. You'd set up farms. You'd start trying to make money. Because again, now individual greatness matters. People like lords and wealthy people, merchants, they want to succeed. They want to make even more money. They want to do better. They want to create more. Kings want to find colonies, places where they can grow all these crops and everything. That's the mindset that spawns out of the Black Death, after the Black Death. Okay, so I think this explains, hopefully to us, pretty well why these expeditions were started. Why did Christopher Columbus cross the ocean blue in 1492? Why did he do that? I think this kind of explains that. But the question still remains about what happens afterwards. After you go to the Americas, why do you stay in the Americas? Why do you set up all these colony stuff? What use do they have? And I think Daniel started the beginnings of the answer. Does anyone want to take a stab at that? Why did they start to create colonies? Spain was kind of here first. Why in the 1500s did they set up colonies here? What were they hoping to get out of it?
Maybe they were like trying to get a persistent trade between Europe and the Americas.
They were trying to get something persistent. So I'll give you a hint, Sebastian. Europeans, they really kind of care about themselves at this point. They want to do whatever they can to make their kingdoms as strong as possible. Like a lot of kingdoms.
So they can conquer these weaker, the weaker natives, and if they do that, they don't need to trade with the natives. They just have to trade with each other.
Yeah, and I mean they don't. Yeah, exactly. And Jason, what do you want to build off of that? I think you have a great answer in the chat.
They want to expand their empire.
Yeah, like part of it is just the idea of like, I want to control more land. I'm a king and I want to control more land. I want to show it to these other European kings and these other European princes that I'm powerful. I control a lot of land. It's about prestige. That's part of it. Glory. What else, Jason? You said something about resources. What do you think about that?
They need like fuel or something.
Well, fuel, but they also need food. They need things to sell. You don't just become powerful and important by just saying, hey, this land over here is mine. Like the United States may be the only country to land humans on the moon, but like, it's not like we're growing farms there or anything. It's not that useful to us. So they want to do more than just say like, hey, we control this area of land in South America or whatever. Spain wants to be able to say like, feel like we're getting a ton of stuff from that area. We're growing food for our people and we're going to sell it to you. We're becoming really powerful. We're powering our country with resources from this area. Now, this happens in very different ways. And this harkens back to this original idea of how important environment, all this stuff, is to everything. Now, here we were talking about how that environment dictates hunter-gatherers in Native America before the Europeans come. But now let's talk about how the environment affects things once the Europeans come. So let's make a simpler drawing, and I'm gonna of course have to ask Tina to rate it after I do so. So here we have Europe. Here we have America. Here we have ocean, and here we have Africa. Okay, so simpler map. Tina, what's your rating?
Significant improvement, 7.1 out of 10.
7.1? Really? Okay, I'm gonna get a 9 one of these days, Tina. I'm gonna work up to it. I believe in myself. Okay? Positive messages, guys. Okay, so we have all this stuff here. We have the basic lay of the land. Oh, and I should probably add some islands here. Okay, so I'm going to point to some places and I want you guys to tell me a bit about them. So Serena, is it warmer here or here?
Definitely the island.
Yeah, it definitely does. So some of these questions are going to be pretty easy. So if you were deciding to set up some farms for sugarcane, which needs like warm weather, where are you going to set it up, Serena?
In somewhere like south and warm place.
Here. You're gonna, if you're Spain, you're gonna come colonize these areas and set up some sugarcane farms there because you want sugarcane to sell to everyone else. Pretty simple. Serena, like those were easy questions, right? that's what I hope. History shouldn't, like, I mean, some of history is, I mean, okay, history is complicated, but when you break it apart into each of its individual pieces, it should be that simple. And this is, Serena literally just answered what happened. They're like, hey, sugarcane grows in these warm little islands. How about we take a bunch of sugarcane and start growing it there? Okay. So we start to get these sugarcane plants and stuff like that. This is sugar. I don't know why it's sugarcane, but it's sugarcane. Spain starts to do that. Okay. Well, then who's going to work there? They want to set up all these giant farms and everything. What's the first idea you guys have for who they're going to get to work there? I'll give you a hint. There are millions of people already living on this continent.
Yeah, the natives already there.
Okay, yeah, the first thing they try is like, okay, we're going to have some Europeans come and do this, but we're not paying for a bunch of European boats to have here. Plus, we think these natives, at least these Europeans thought the natives were much inferior. The Spanish had just conquered a bunch of natives. So they're like, okay, we're going to make them, really it was making them, through this thing called the encomienda system. We're going to make them work at these sugarcane plants. That's what the Spanish did. They're like, okay, you have to do this. But what happens is that basically, like, most of the Native American population just kind of dies. Not because of war, but because of something else. Can anyone guess what that is? Ethan?
Disease.
Yes, disease. Like 80 to 90%. We were talking about like 33%, but 80 to 90% of native tribe people are just die off after encountering Europeans. And it's not because of anything active done by either side. It's just that these native populations, just like we talked about how there were plants in one area that weren't in another, or animals like the horses that were in Europe, but not in the Americas. Well, there were diseases in Europe and Africa and Asia that had never reached the Americas. So there was no immunity that these people had to the diseases. Now, it's not that, like, I mean, a ton of Europeans and Africans throughout history died of smallpox, probably just as many. But it happened more slowly and steadily over time, and they built up an immunity. But just like with the Black Death, you have this sudden crash in population. Civilizations fall, like the Aztecs fall, partially because of European strength in military, but also a lot because of just disease. And important now, all these workers, they're just dying off. There's no more workers you can get from the native population to work at these sugarcane farms. Or some English people in the early 1600s, they start creating tobacco farms and stuff like that over here. That's tobacco in the southern United States. Pretty warm. Okay, so what do you do after that happens? So that you can't get the native population as labor anymore. What do you do next? Sebastian is right, but there's one medium step that happens in the middle. So
Yeah, I mean both I mean importing people in general, not really importing slaves.
yeah, exactly. So like what kind of happens first, and I think Great Britain's important enough, we'll draw them separately. So all these European powers are starting to set up their little colonies in the Americas. The native population is dying off, especially in the US area. In Central and South America, there's a much larger native population. So there's more people who are still alive, and there was a lot of interbreeding, a lot of intermarriage and children of European parents and native parents. That results in a larger native population still being able to work there. But these crops, they're really labor intensive. You need way more people to work on them. So at first, the English are like, okay, people who want to leave, people who are poor in England, you can go out here and you can start farming there. But to pay for your trip over there, you've got to be an indentured servant. I think somebody mentioned that in the chat. Jason, good job, Jason, silver star. You got to go be an indentured servant. Basically what that means is, English person, you get a free trip. You get a free trip on the ship, a one-way ticket. But for 10 years, you got to work on the farm kind of as a slave to some, like, you know, wealthy landowner there. And then if you survive the 10 years, you get your own plot of land. That's your own little farm. Now, it's a bit of a trick because most of these people do not survive the 10 years. A few do, some do, like 40 or 30% do, but most of them will die within that 10 years. So they never have to get their land. But that's kind of how it works at first, but that's not really scalable. It can't grow. You can never get enough people that way to agree to that. So then finally, what Sebastian says is what really happens. The slave trade is born. The predominant metric of the slave trade, well, slaves are coming from Africa, a place where Europe also is dominant because of their technology and their like larger civilizations. So Europe is dominating in Africa because they can trade guns. So Europe trades guns. They trade like metal, like work, so like cooking stuff, things like that. They do all these kind of things, and then in exchange, the African tribes and African civilizations give up slaves. They give up people. And those people, the Europeans, have sent to the Americas. Most slaves go to not the United States, but to Central and South America, to these sugar plantations to work there. And then finally, all of that is brought back to Europe to be sold, to buy more guns, to buy more pans, to build bigger stuff, to build better warfare stuff, to feed the population, whatever it is. This is what's called the Columbian Exchange. Basically, it's a three-pronged thing. You sell things to Africa, guns, pans, whatever, things that Europe manufactures. African tribes sell people in exchange for that, which are then shipped over to the Americas over here. And then those places sell tobacco and sugarcane back to Europe, which then are the fuel of that civilization, of European civilizations, so that they can build even more guns and even more pots. So, Serena, can you explain that basic process to me?
So basically, Europe sells the things that Africa doesn't have, like cooking stuff and guns and metal, to Africa. And in exchange, Africa gives them people, which goes to America, and those farms. And those slaves, people, work on farms, and the product, the results of the farms, goes back to Europe.
Okay, gold star, that was a beautiful explanation. However, I will need to have Daniel. Do you think she deserves the gold star? I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay, this will be way more fun if you guys like were mean to each other. I mean, it's great. I'm so happy you guys are friends, but I'm just saying, and it's also making me jealous because like right now, like I'm not that nice to my sister ever. So I'm feeling like a bit immature if you guys are like what is it, however much younger you are than me, and you guys are already nicer to each other than I am to my sister. Anyways, I'm not going to tell her about you, Daniel. Then she'll start to ask for a new family. Anyways, the last question I have before we all leave, since it's already 9 Central Time. I want us to use these skills, this whole thing of finding cause and effect relationships. Look at this. Like, we came from this, like, just like literally I drew out a very bad picture of some grass and some fish and whatever. And we've done I think a pretty decent job of showing how that leads to this, a much more complicated system of trade and crop growing and weather patterns and all of that leading to this giant, massive trade of millions of people being enslaved and billions of tons of sugar and tobacco being shipped over the sea and all that sort of stuff. So we've gotten to this point. Now, the question I want to ask you is, okay, who here knows what the Civil War is? Who's fighting in the Civil War, Ethan?
America.
Okay, well, yes, America's fighting itself. So it's the North versus the South, right, Ethan?
Yeah.
Okay, and what is one of the biggest reasons the Civil War starts that you know of?
The question of whether slavery should be legal or not.
Okay, so based on just this image, this is kind of the North US eventually. This area where tobacco grows is the South US. Based on just this image, why do you think those battle lines were drawn the way they were? Why is the South so insistent? Let's ask Serena. She's raising her hand.
Because they need the slaves because they have big farms that need people to work on.
Yeah, they think they need this. I'm not going to say they need the slaves because I don't agree with that. But they, like you say, they're basically like, we have all this tobacco stuff. We're using slavery to basically power our economy. Whereas in the North, we're going to spend a lot of next week talking about what the North does, which is very different. But they don't need slaves. So they're like, well, we think slavery is wrong because it is wrong. And we don't really have any reason to think otherwise. Whereas the South, they're like, their culture is built upon slavery because of this trade, because of the environment. So good weather, honestly, like warm, humid weather, warmish, humid weather, is the reason slavery is established in the South. It's the reason the Civil War happens to a great degree. And it's a reason many of the divisions between Democrats and Republicans today exist. It goes back all the way back to literally just weather patterns, to ecosystems, to biomes. Now, it's not just this, it's many other things, but I want you to understand how those simple things, weather, where crops can grow, affect where civilizations start by rivers, where plantations start, where there's a cash crop like tobacco that can grow, which then affects what the culture is. Do we embrace slavery or not? Which affects wars like the Civil War. It affects philosophies and it affects politics till today. So that's the last thing I wanted to get across to you. This continuum from biomes, from environment, from nature, hundreds of years ago, to the politics and events of today. Okay, cool beans, everyone? Say cool beans. Cool beans. Okay, if you have any questions, please feel free to stay after class. Otherwise, see you next week. We'll be talking about Northern US and the build up to the American Revolution. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I use cool beans. It's cool beans to say cool beans.